So I'm just going to talk a little about sort of where we are on our journey, and I definitely classify it as a journey. So I think some of the previous presenters have commented on, what this takes. Sometimes it's small groups within cities, but um, in terms of like where Hamilton is, and looking sort of at the maturity model, and there's a bunch of different maturity models around smart cities. I would still classify us sort of in those early stages. We're really focused. We've put our feet into the water on certain pilots. We're trying to find fits with what the larger organization is doing and supporting the work that's happening across the organization. But in terms of maturity, with all the defined sort of governance and policy pieces in place, I think we're still learning. And I wanted to start off that way because I think sometimes there's that impression of, oh, like there's a bit of, I say FOMO, like I look at some of the work that Kitty's doing or other jurisdictions are doing, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I wish we could do some of that here. But I think my message is that really everybody is starting out, and even a fairly large city like Hamilton, we're the 10th largest region by population, we're still trying to figure out what this looks like. And I think it's going to continue to evolve. And definitely that sort of more sense of a connected community that has sensors that are inputting data to drive operational efficiencies is a piece of it, but there's a lot more to it of how smart city is evolving in that term. One of the things we're trying to do is actually develop a strategy that can help sort of lead the work that's happening going forward in the city. There are other cities that have really good strategies out there, and there's some good guidelines. We've chosen to focus on these three areas. And I think one of the key messages again here is that you start to see this theme coming up that it's not necessarily a tech play always. It's more about how can we align to the needs. And I believe one of the earlier speakers had mentioned this. It's really about like helping residents or helping our community achieve something, and that can be on the infrastructure and sustainability side. Um, we heard Chelsea talk about some of the potential coming out from the smart cities challenge around it being climate focused, so that's a big area of climate awareness, GHG reduction, net zero, climate resiliency. Citizen engagement too, really being able to connect with citizens, understand what their needs are, and aligning programs and delivery, and a piece of technology that goes with that to support that. And then I think on a larger basis, we look at this whole how do we drive economic growth? And that could be through education pathways, that could be through partnerships, that could be our post secondary workforce training programs. One little example I can talk to there is, for example, the city, like many others, is looking at what are the strategies around electrification and moving fleets to EV fleets. And one of the biggest challenges that have been identified is that we don't have the skill sets to maintain that from a fleet perspective. So we see, and in discussions with our community college programs around developing like EV training programs. So this is something you might not think of, like sort of when you hear about the smart city work, but I think it's very important to consider that bigger package uh, of areas that fit within the strategic pillars. And this is just how we've defined them. There's different ways to slice and dice these, but this is how we're going to try to tackle it going forward. And what we also see is that often there's a lot of work that's already happening as part of the operations of a city and council priorities, um, and capital funding and asset management. And sometimes it's about trying to wrap all of those and capturing the work that's happening a city and within a city, to be able to share that story of the great work that happens at all municipalities and towns and regions. Doesn't matter what size you are. I think um, people that are in the municipal space really. I don't want to go. It's almost like a vocation in the sense of you want to do things for the benefit of your community, and there's a lot of great work that's happening there. And it doesn't really matter what you call it, but it can often apply to this sort of smart city connected community domain. So just a couple examples, and I think these aren't. I think you could find similar elsewhere, but just some of the things that we've done here in Hamilton, if it's of interest. I think again going back to that whole mobility piece and transportation, large focus on how we can achieve Vision Zero. Some of that will come into play around sort of technologies at intersections and part of the traffic management systems. But again, just being able to present the data of how we are measuring and moving the needle around our Vision Zero strategies. We've recently launched a micromobility program, and we've seen some existing interesting results in terms of GHG reductions that have occurred, the number of rides. And the interesting thing, we've actually also seen an increase in use of our bike ride share program. So we didn't see a cannibalization of bicycle usage when the e-scooter program was released. And we're also piloting an e-cargo bike program within the city. Hamilton's also home to Smart Commute. So Smart Commute is a shared program delivered uh, amongst a few areas. Hamilton just happens to be the administrative lead, again, encouraging ability for folks to connect and commute through a program that's delivered through the city. We have our LRT project, and really, at the end of the day, the LRT project will deliver transportation needs that will take, in our case, either diesel or natural gas powered buses out of circulation and replace them with an electric means of transportation through the LRT. But it's also a significant infrastructure rebuild project. And as part of that, we're trying to think ahead around the needs from a connectivity perspective and ensuring we have the in-ground structures to allow us to create that city sort of connected network that we could use for future projects and to serve us from more of like a 50-year timeline, rather than thinking more short term as an asset, and the value an asset like that could bring to the city if we have the ability to ensure we have in-ground works to support that type of connectivity. And again, this the idea of an open city. I think really our purpose is to serve our residents, and we are custodians of data. We are custodians of taxpayer dollars. So how do we ensure we're presenting that information and also making cities performance available to residents? We've done a few things in the recent years. Again, I think open data is a big part of that, in terms of that transparency piece and ensuring that the city's data becomes accessible by others. Again, something open data has been around for years, and for us, it's more about how do we ensure that the data that becomes available makes sense and aligns to the interests of the community. Last year, we launched a beta dashboard. So we had previously had a whole bunch of metrics that really didn't make a lot of sense to, I think, the public. We took about 900 metrics, collapsed those down to a little over 100, really focused on things like census data, performance of various departments, key metrics, some finance metrics, and we've launched a dashboard. And as part of this dashboard, we've also will be releasing activities related to council priorities. So we have as with many other areas went through the election, council has identified their key priorities, and we'll be using the city dashboard as a way of communicating those priorities to the community and actually showing the action items that have been achieved on a 6-month basis against those priorities. And we also recently launched our open data policy. Again, not rocket science, to be honest, but something that the city was missing and part of that evolutionary roadmap to becoming a more smart or open or intelligent community, whichever term you want to apply to it. I couldn't probably miss mentioning some IoT related projects, because really a lot of that is where we saw some of this initial excitement around how tech can intersect with delivering operational services. And again, I would say the key one thing I'd say here is that we've really done some pilots, but we've struggled with the ability to move them into long-term operational programs. And I don't think we're that much different from everybody else in that front, but it speaks to, really having to find a good ROI that aligns with operational priorities. And sometimes you just got to try stuff and see what works, fail fast. And if it doesn't work, you still have a lot of learnings away that you can take away from that. So in this case, we did a great project. The only way we were able to do this project was because we had funding through a government program, and we partnered with a local IoT smart city company called Iris. And what we did is we launched. Initially, we had looked at a use case, and there wasn't interest in the city of exploring the main use case, which was roads assessment for this type of technology. But we pivoted and we did waste assessment. So you can see there is a little device that's mounted, IoT device, privacy centric, has edge based computing algorithms that redact anything that's privacy related. And we were able to deploy it in our waste vehicles and get really detailed usage or detailed around waste participation. So in the past, we found you'd have to send out a human effectively to go and walk through certain neighborhoods. We did some before and after analysis of the data that was coming through that solution with what manual counts did, and the ability to train that model to collect things like identify garbage waste bins, recycling bins, compost bins, and then be able to map it in real time was an amazing opportunity and a learning curve for our waste group. And it gave them access to data at a cost point that they really couldn't have done without it. We wanted to put our foot in the water around virtual agents. So for our election, as one of the accessibility goals of the municipal election, we launched a chat bot that was available through Siri, Alexa, um, and Google. Sorry, it wasn't through Siri, it was just Alexa and Google. But residents could ask information on where their polling station was, what were the hours, where was the closest accessible station, and we paired that with a virtual agent. And again, it was an opportunity for us to try something on a small basis specific for the municipal election and see what sort of adoption we got, and be able to measure some of that. The IoT pilot I had mentioned on earlier led to a second project with our transportation division where they wanted to do some sign inventory. Instead of doing manual sign inventory, again, that was a perfect opportunity to use the similar technology that we tried earlier, which again had come through a funding partnership for the city to then do some inventory of certain signs using those same devices deployed in our roll patrol devices in the transportation side. And even I had mentioned about sort of that transition from pilot to operational challenges. The virtual agent learnings that we did through the election pilot allowed us then to build on and launch a virtual agent to support pool permitting through our PED group, which has taken some call volumes off our planning group, where folks can go and get detailed information about the permitting requirements around pools and hot tubs and things like that. Um, on the innovation side, obviously important to have those partnerships. We see our community partners as well as our post-secondary institutions as being really big partners in helping deliver on some of this, or as a resource. We have a program at the city called City Lab, which we partner city-based projects with our post-secondary institutions, which has had a lot of success. We have things, even it's not the domain of the city. Yeah, we fund the libraries, but part of that is things like maker spaces that are available through the library programs. We have an innovation park that's a collaboration with the local University of McMaster, where they're looking to create a breeding ground and fostering that move from research all the way over to product commercialization, and bringing that ecosystem sort of under one roof. We have our Regional Innovation Center, which is Innovation Factory, which would be our equivalent of sort of Mars and Communitech. With that, we have a regional technology development site that's called the Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility that's funded through the Oven Group. And we have a urban test bed. So we have some 5G, 4G, V2X, and some IoT-based sensors that are deployed out along one of our main roads, and that feeds into a research data repository that startups and other companies can use to try out technology. And for example, with Mohawk College, they have a unmanned and remote sensing innovation center they call it, and they were really looking for an opportunity to be able to have a place in the city where that program could do R&D as well as drive some of their curriculum programs. So we launched a drone research park and a part of the city, and went through the process of getting that approved, which is now available for both researchers and companies through Mohawk to leverage. But that was a first for us as well. So, where are we sort of currently? We're really looking to, again, be able to capture the work that's happening across the city and show alignment to that earlier commentary I made around priorities, trying to connect to the various work that's happening in the different cities to this main theme, and looking at also what's happening in other jurisdictions to see what we can leverage. Because often it's not about recreating the wheel, but leveraging what's already been done maybe by others and seeing how it fits for Hamilton. We have a maturity assessment that we're in the process of doing. And as I'd mentioned, that sort of connected smart city strategy that will also be part of our economic development plan. Again, it's it's there's so many things happening in a city. Often it's about getting and finding those collaborations and competing priorities. And I think really it's sometimes about making sure we're aligning to the challenges that the city's facing, both from a council perspective and what residents face. So yeah, it's really cool to think about, real-time notification of parking spot availability, or I think the poster boy for smart cities is the smart bin, reduce your GHGs, optimize your routes, use less resources. But I think when we look at things like homelessness, climate change, uh, weather resiliency, and just the fiscal challenges that a city faces, it's how do we really try to achieve and support some of those goals to the work that we do as a smart city. And that's it for me. Thanks everybody for your time.